In a rapidly shifting society, now more than ever, it is essential to stay grounded. Balance is key, but harmony is better. Here, we provide the keys to tap into the divine masculine without sacrificing the divine feminine, because confusion not transmuted becomes confusion transferred.
This is Divine Masculine Activated, a weekly Tuesday evening tap-in brought to you by Mastermind Connect and curated by the good brothers J.D. Weatherspoon and Courtney Grange. We invite you to grab your activation method of choice, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and bring your whole self into this space.
Yes, y'all.
Ore is you.
Hey, capacities, Shango.
Hey, Kudole, bro.
Oh, what's going on, brother?
Man, I can't complain, baby. I can't complain. How you living?
I'm good. It's Gemini season. It has a special place in my heart. So this gonna be an episode for. This episode is dedicated to all the Geminis. We're gonna start off like that.
So translation for those who don't speak astrology, that's basically Courtney saying we're actually going to have more petty on this episode than we did on the Pretty and Petty podcast episode. By the way, I'm sorry, UA. It's not our fault. We didn't plan for it to be this way. We will bring more petty to y'all in some other capacity in the future.
Ta-da. Shout out to the lovely ladies of Pretty and Petty podcast. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thank you for coming to this episode of the Divine Masculine Activated. I am Courtney Grange. He is
J.D. Weatherspoon.
And together we bring you this lovely container that we have created around defining divine masculinity and talking about all the other stuff that goes with it.
Sorry, that felt really good. I'm excited about today's episode. This is why we do it, right? And it's really just, let's define it first, right? That good old container that we've been harping about. I'm waiting for this endorsement from like Pyrex. So divine masculinity for us is the ability to activate masculine energy without sacrificing your feminine energy. Why do we do this? I'm glad you asked.
Ta-da. We do this because our nurturing as men has often taught us that anything feminine is reserved for women and everything masculine is about being hard, forceful, or choosing logic over empathy. We created DMA to unpack what we've been taught about masculinity and reshape what we think about femininity.
Absolutely. So why should you care? Well, last season we did set this foundation, right? We opened up the conversation about being our sister's keepers. It was a live discussion curtailing the importance of platonic yet, intimate relationships between men and women. Collectively, what are the benefits that it provides? And also like the personal, the interpersonal, and the societal benefits as well. What we're doing differently now is pushing the envelope by creating an entire segment. It's composed of multiple episodes, and they each highlight some of the divine feminine, I can speak English, archetypes in our lives, what they do, and above all, how it benefits all of us.
And now it brings us to the last episode in the series of Am I My Sister's Keeper? And we've got a really important, I don't even say special, we got an important guest for this evening's conversation. The homie, the friend, the sister, none other than Shantrelle P. Lewis, aka Shantrelle the Kang, aka Trail, aka a whole bunch of other stuff we're gonna have her introduce herself with.
So but not fair.
Just to give you a quick background on who this mighty individual is, Shantrelle Lewis is a former curator, a scholar, a critic, and a filmmaker. She is a 2020 Andy Warhol Curatorial Fellow and a 2014 United Nations Program for People of African Descent Fellow. She has done big things across the globe, and we are going to talk about those things as well as a bunch of other things today. So without further ado, everybody, Shantrelle P. Lewis. I wish I had
all of that. What's up, y'all?
What's up, Trell?
What's happening?
First of all, I'm loving all of our very profound and distinct accents. You know, we got the area, you know, we got the dirty represented. You know what I'm saying?
But then we got Nolans in here, like from the ruler to the tutor on it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Which ward though? You have to be specific.
That 1.5, that's Algiers. That's what I represent, and that lower 9, because that's what my daddy folks is from.
Algiers.
Yes.
Algiers has like a whole ancestor festival. Like,
yeah, my girl Sunny and another sister started Sunny Patterson.
Yeah, Sunny Patterson.
At Gungun Festival. I told her, I was like, there's no way I'm not gonna be like, all up in and through that joint. I mean, when she sent the video, I was just like bawling, like tears. Like, because it was during COVID, and they divined to see whether or not when to do it, and they held it, and I was just like watching the footage over and over again and just like bawling, and what's funny about Sunny and funny about us is that our grandmothers were best friends.
Wow.
And we went to high school together, went to Xavier Prep together. She went to Tuskegee, I went to Howard. Then we reconnected when I moved back home after Katrina. And it will always, like, no matter where, I would be in the world somewhere, and somebody would be like, oh, you remind me of this other sister from New Orleans. I'm like, Sunny. And it's always been funny to me how our hair has been similar at different points in our lives. Like, our head shaved at the same time. So, like, it's just wild, like froze or whatever. So I don't know what she rocking right now in terms of her hairstyle, but Sunny is my sister. And then our roots, like my mama used to babysit like her aunts and uncles or something like that. Like we got some deep roots. And then of course the Algiers lineage, like that's the first place where enslaved Africans were brought to New Orleans and then sold across the river. So that's hoodoo time.
Listen, when we talk about this woman is a historian on top of all the other things, like we're not playing about that.
No, Shantrelle is a whole griot out here. I need y'all to understand.
Let's talk about
you are looking at a culture personified.
In human form. As always, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank y'all for coming through today. Please like, subscribe, share this episode with everybody that you know. We're doing our best to make sure that these conversations get put into the ethers of the culture all around, and we need your support to do that. At any time you would like to ask a question or leave a comment, please do so in the chat. We will bring it to the forefront if it is plausible and time permits. That being said, we want to get this thing off, Shantrelle, because we got a lot to try to pack into this time frame that we got.
Look, we already got started. Okay.
We gonna try.
We almost missed the episode. Chopping it up in the green room.
Listen, we was in that joint just talking and tapping in, man.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Before we start, let's shout out real quick. Candace, Tiffany, Rashad, thank you for jumping in and jumping on.
We appreciate y'all as always. The early birds to the worms as always. Yes. So to kick this thing off, like Shantrelle, you and I share a really unique history because like our meeting was random, but like right on time. And I remember the first time that we were together when we were working in, student, young people development and like working with different organizations. We were in a car in Brooklyn trying to get to our Airbnb at like the worst time to find parking, right? I think Zaki was driving. And it's like, we ain't gonna find no parking spot. And Chantrell's like, no, I'm magic. Like, I'm a witch. I'm gonna get us a parking spot. And I was just like, because he's in the front driving like, bro, what is she talking about? Whoop, like, got it going on and on. Next thing you know, whoop, parking spot show right up. From that point forward, I was like, oh, this woman's magic is real.
What time was it? Like, we talking after 11 or after like 3?
It was after 5, bro. Like, yeah.
Like a Saturday, Sunday?
It was a weekday at that. Trying to find parking in Brooklyn on a weekday after 5 p.m. Like, and this was on, this is an Airbnb. So this is a block where everybody is home. Like, there's no reason we should have found this parking spot. But I think it was like right near our building too, right?
Yeah, it was part of it. Yeah, it was tight.
Yeah. From there forward, I knew like this woman was magical. And like, We continue to have conversations.
Just let me know when you need a ride somewhere. All right. That's all I took from that conversation.
Right. But that brings me to like the first topic in talking about like relationships, because I love to start there because everything for us centers around relationships, whether they're intimate, platonic, romantic, whatever. And so I've noticed that like as we move through these cultures that we experience, whether it's African American culture, hip hop culture, HBCU culture, divine nine culture, West African traditional culture, Afro-Cuban culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's always been this misguided construct of like immature energy being toxic, right? Mm-hmm. And so on the masculine side is where we see it show up the most because we talk about toxic masculinity.
Right.
D, I've always heard you, brother, talk about like that concept of there is no such thing as toxic masculinity because masculinity is not toxic, just like femininity is not toxic. It's relevant to the individual in their own personal level of maturity. So to start this thing off strong and get deeply into how we do it with the divine masculine aspect, right? Can you bring for us, like for you, what does divine masculinity mean? What does divine femininity mean for you?
Good question. Good thing you did not send me these questions before. Simone, that's really interesting. Because I don't know that I've ever thought about it as, even though I've explored it, I think that they are primordial concepts, right? I was on the phone with one of my elders the other day, Mama Coco, and she was saying everything has a twin. You know, there's a yin and a yang. And she literally was, I'm going to tell y'all what she said because, you know, Mama Coco keeps it real.
Keep it 100. Listen.
Keep it 1,000. Somebody was
Mama Coco.
And she was like, and she was like, to give up her services or something like that, like for free, I guess. And she was like, quid quo pro, or it's a no-go ho. She was like New Orleans style. So I'm just going to, that was not my Mama Coco by way of content. So she was just talking about everything has a compliment. You know what I mean? Like you asking for, you know, you asking for like something, and then there has to be some type of exchange. And so I don't know that I've ever thought about how to define what divine masculinity is versus in collaboration with in synchronicity with divine feminine, because I've always explored these things. Yeah. And I don't know that there is a definition that we as like mortals, as human beings, even as spirit beings can, you know, just say this right here is divine masculine and this right here is divine feminine, particularly within the polarity, because I think both concepts there is a lot of fluidity there. And so I think, and it's something that we experience, right? We can witness. So like we can witness the divine masculinity in nature. We could witness divine femininity in nature. Like I did the very first exhibition that I curated in New York was called Wearing Spirit. Like the aesthetic personification of the divine feminine African spiritual traditions.
Oh, all right. The very first one was that.
That was my very first work as a curator in New York. You know, like that opened up my curatorial career in New York. And so even then it was like, I don't know that it was not an attempt to define, but as opposed to an attempt to explore. So I don't know if I really didn't answer your question, but it's Gemini season. So here we are.
That's it. But you did answer the question.
A lot of words.
Like a lot of times when we, you know, JD and I always talk about like, well, when you're presented with either or, the option is usually the answer is usually yes, right? Because it's not one thing or another. We are in a consciousness of polarity, light, dark, life, death, happy, sad, which always makes us look at things as if they require that polarity. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about what's harmonious, it's usually the space in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. Where these two things overlap. And so all this energy coming from this side, energy coming from this side is going to show up differently in nature, in human beings, in relationships, in this conversation versus that conversation, in, you know, my Aries tendencies, your Gemini tendencies, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, at least, you answered the conversation. Audience, if you would like her to expound or go deeper, let us know in the chat. We're going to keep moving forward.
Nobody. Great. Shout out to all the Geminis.
Oh, no, you got to give us some time. You got to give us some time. So,
like,
shout out to
the Geminis and the Gemini lovers in the house, because there's a lot of hateration and holleration in this dancery. Shout out to my folk, Charlotte's Web.
I love the shout out session. This is amazing.
It is. We got a quick freeze on Shantrelle. Hopefully she come back.
See,
look, these Wi-Fi's. We see she started talking about Geminis,
and stuff just stopped working the way it's supposed to. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
So we're gonna have a quick pause for the calls while Shantrelle is there. JD, you want to jump us into something while we wait for her?
I mean, honestly, right now it's a crazy pivot because there we go. We have questions coming out.
Ta-da.
Is it always harmonious between the divine entities?
No. Because I mean, at least from my perspective, I would say no, right? Because that point of collision in the middle, right, is initially static because this flows this way, this flows this way. To touch on something that Tony Jones said in one of our earlier episodes, the shoreline, right? And so if the beach is masculine, the ocean is feminine, the shoreline is what is that space of harmony in between. And like, does the water not crash up against the shore? Does the water not eventually erode the shoreline and create a new one? They impact each other. So I would say the harmony from my perspective is the impact that they have once they come together.
So to me, that is what harmony is. That is quite like harmony includes the static. And I think for me, it's a matter of us assuming that harmony means that there are no periods of discomfort.
That's right. Because
the beauty is in the discomfort, fool. That's the point.
Fool.
Because this is my self-talk coming out. This is how I talk to me. I look at all of this as an extension of self. So
as you should.
Don't feel as though I'm calling you a fool, actually.
Listen, I went to school in the South. What they do, fool, was a common occurrence. So I have no offense in that at all.
Who said I was talking to you?
I'm just talking about me because, like you said, I'm taking it to my perspective. Listen, like the brother Briscoe brings up a good one as well, the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, for those that do subscribe to that theory of creation, absolutely.
The impact they have once they come together, that's real. Cool. I like how people do that.
I can dig that. We got it back. Hold on, y'all. Bang.
Yo, that's Mercury retrograde and janky ass Comcast, and it might be let me go get him some rum. Pause for the call.
Go take care of my papa. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, so for those of you that may not have caught it, Shantrelle is going to take care of Elegua. Elegua is a deity in the Yoruba pantheon that is the keeper of the crossroads of all kinds. So like the bridge, the divine broker, me Baba, as you can see, I have on all of my Eshu energy today. So just a quick history lesson before she came back into the space.
Yo, I was like, let me give you some rum real quick, bro. Like this retrograde, we gonna surfboard through this retrograde.
Sister Rasha, we appreciate you. Send us all the good vibes and energy so this thing keep on trucking through.
Woo! That was also them saying, like, move on to the next question.
Ta-da. JD, good brother, it is on you.
I'm back. Let's get it. So my first question that I have for you is, from my experience, it seems as though most humans pay attention and they get their lessons, assuming they're in that mind space where they assume something has to be learned as opposed to remembered, correct? So they learn through discomfort. What discomfort pushed you in a direction of learning how to love differently?
Say that again.
like what did you go through that led you to the point of awareness that you developed, right? Everything that you've done, there's been a level of self involved. There's a connection to faith. There was a connection to like the way that you perceive the world. You've always understood energy. You've always understood polarities.
Mm-hmm.
How did you learn that understanding of polarities?
Growing up in a very color-struck society in New Orleans, like, and there being a dark skin, there being a light skin, there being like a brown paper bag. And while I did not experience like a brown paper bag test, you know, growing up, but I was always acutely aware of like people that are passe blonde that could pass for white, and you know, my dark skin. Now, like JD, you know, and it could be the lighting as well. It looks like, you know, it looks like my complexion is closer to Courtney's, but Courtney in New Orleans is red, right?
Yeah.
In my perception, JD, you and I are the same complexion. It wasn't until I like, you know, migrated to the East Coast, you know, to the Howard, that I was like, oh, I'm really brown skinned, you know, also because of like the lack of light and all of that. But like, you know, when I was in Jamaica, you know, a month ago, and I was just like, oh, this, and I came back, they were like, damn, you know, like all the Nigerians in the house, because they were like, oh, you're, you know, I'm like, yeah, this is actually my true color. Like,
color. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that growing up, that was the first, I think, experience in terms of adversity that made me understand like a polarity that exists, and having to push, you know what I mean? Like beyond that and push through that and have like a strong sense of identity, finding like pride in my melanin, because it connected me with my Jamaican Egun, you know, Nathaniel, they call him the Colonel, Nathan Lewis, who came to the States from Jamaica through Cuba, went to Tuskegee, and then became a professor at Southern University in Baton Rouge. Like, shout out to HBCUs. And then also my Haitian heritage as well. So that was like the first thing. And so I had to like, and then trigger warning, surviving like sexual abuse, right? And so I was like, between growing up in like color-struck society, surviving sexual abuse at the hands of somebody who was passe blonde, I had to be really deeply rooted in, grounded in a sense of identity in itself, and like knowing that everything I had to do, like everything I did in life, was like a part of a higher purpose, and that I follow my why and not necessarily like what society, family, community expected of me. That's what like that had to show up in everything that I do. So even like in my work, you know, in my curatorial work, my filmmaking work, if anything that I do, like I do it as myself, because I know my why. My why is the liberation of Black people, period. And so any meeting that I'm in, whether I'm stating that or not, whether that's like on a t-shirt or not, whether I'm at a rally or not, you know, that is my why. I'm very clear on that. And I'm also clear on the fact that I was given a very clear instruction by Egun when I was sent here. I was put on a mission. And so then I'm not necessarily listening to trends or listening to expectations of somebody sitting across from me in a boardroom.
Yeah.
Like the what I'm listening to and what I'm tapped into is my intuition as a child and as a young adult, is Egun, is my Orisha, is my Ita, all of these different things, right? And so, but it was the adversity, even coming through my mother's womb, like my umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. And it wasn't until I was in this like class or discussion group with my elders during COVID, and we were going over Baba John Mason's book, Ararara, on Shango.
On Shango, yep.
That we were talking, one of my Shango goddesses brought up names that Yoruba people give to kids that are born with like the caul over their eye, their caul right around their neck with like 6 fingers. And so the name given to people born with the umbilical cord wrapped around their neck is Aina, fire, who is like Shango's companion, right? And so I'm like, I was marked at birth to be a child of Shango.
That's it.
You know what I mean?
So hold on, before
went through the fire.
Shantrelle, before you go too far, because
let's get them up to speed.
You giving us everything that we need these people to have right now, but you mentioned 3 specific things that I wanted to call out for us to identify for the audience. First and foremost, Egun, then Ita, and then Shango, right? So hopefully we can go in that order, like from like progression in regards to the depth. But first and foremost, like when we talk about Egun, like what do you mean? What are you saying to the people?
Egun are my ancestors or the ancestors in a Yoruba context. So because if you're talking about an Akan context, ancestors may be called something else. If you're talking about a Zulu context, an Igbo context, you know, they might be called by different names, but in a Yoruba context, you know, and in Yoruba spirituality and it's, you know, all of its many branches from Candomblé to Santeria to Lukumi, you know, Isheshe, all of these different traditions, Ifa, Egun are your ancestors. And so there's like little Egun, there's big Egun. You know, you have the ones who are connected to you like through your direct lineage by birth. And then there are those like larger Egun that are part of like the collective, you know, like spirit guides and ancestors that might not necessarily be your like direct lineage, right?
Right.
So
that's your Marvel universe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's the whole squad.
That's the whole squad.
Yeah, Avengers, X-Men.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's funny.
The Army better get a Navy. My Egun squad, they run real deep.
It's funny that you mentioned that, JD, because like as a comic book nerd growing up, I always was like, wow, they have all of these different universes in one universe together, but they're separate. And so practicing the multiverse construct, right? So practicing these traditions that Shantrelle's talking about today, it's kind of like I was already being conditioned from a very young age to be open to how this thing is fully constructed. Now, the second thing you mentioned, Shantrelle, was Ita, right? So give us a little bit in terms of like, what is an Ita?
So I am a Lukumi Shango priest, which means that I went through initiation to become a priest. So I'm not just I began practicing Lukumi in like 2004, and I was first really formally introduced to it. Now looking back, when I look at my spiritual hierarchy and my spirit, like the architecture of my spiritual lineage, I was like introduced to it like way earlier than
you just didn't realize that's what it was.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when I became conscious of what it was a trip to Brazil in 2004, and that's when I began practicing Lukumi. I initiated as a priest in 2000. I'm gonna be 60 this year, so 2015.
And very grown now.
Listen, I'm like my Jesus year, six. So you know that's Shango's number. So when you initiate into Lukumi, at least in that specific tradition, you're given what's called Ita, which is like the reading of your life. So it's like your personal Bible, the do's and don'ts, your 10 commandments of your life, right? Where it's like, thou shalt not this, thou shalt do this. And in contrast to like Christianity, where you're like, it's this idea of like sin if you disobey these things. This is like, this will make your life easier. This will give balance. You can do what you want. You can do whatever the fuck you want to do, right? It will behoove you though, however, to follow this prescription of your life. And it's the idea that we're all brought into the world with certain lessons that we are here to learn. You know, there's like balance that we're trying to maintain always in our life. And this is like a roadmap of like, this is why you are the way you are, because of these things happen. This is how you can avoid pitfalls in the future by observing these things. And this is how you can create more harmony and balance in your life. And so that's what you're given. As also when you initiate as a priest, but then also when you receive like different Orisha in the Yoruba pantheon, again, in that universe is like, those are the deities, the gods and goddesses, lowercase g. Because, and what a lot of people don't realize, in most African spiritual traditions, not all, but most, they are monotheistic. There's God with a capital G.
One God, yep.
The system, not a Baruchu, can be God with a capital G, and it's feminine, divine, mostly feminine energy. Or it can be, you know, in the case of like, you know, Yoruba, like Olodumare or Lofi, you know, God with a capital G, that has more masculine, you know, associations and qualities associated with, you know, Olodumare or Lofi, right? And so Yeah. So anyway, so when you like receive like these, like the embodiment, the physical embodiment on earth of these like entities or deities, you also like receive an ita. But so going back to mine, that's my prescription. And I've always, because I grew up Catholic, Black Catholic, because I think that's a distinction, growing up Black Catholic. And I tell people too, when they start talking about Christianity and whatnot, and even Catholicism, because folks will be like, oh, I grew up Pentecostal and Kojic and AME and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's the Black Catholic Church that actually, and a Roman Catholic Church in which our tradition survived in Haiti, in Brazil, in these places that were colonized by the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, that we were able to syncretize our systems. And so it's like, oh, you're talking about like Saint Anthony of Padua, that's Alegba,
like Santa Barbara, that's Shango.
Exactly, right? This is Oshun, this is Yemiya. So it was through the cloak of secrecy within the framework of the Catholic Church and those deities, that universe of spirituality, and then like even the Trinity between God, the Holy Spirit and Jesus. Also then these deities that Yoruba, that Vodou was able to like survive and thrive. You know what I mean?
Which brings us to what most people would understand as modern day voodoo, right? The tradition of Vodou. So
exactly, out of Benin.
So we unpacking a lot for y'all in a really micro bite-sized bit.
Yeah, this is changing our resource list, by the way.
I thought these were things that y'all had already covered on the show, so I thought it was just like.
So we tap into it a little bit, but like we like JD said, we try to hide the medicine in the candy a lot of times, right? Because this conversation requires a lot of people to accept that what they've been nurtured to believe as their nature is not anything more than just what they were taught. So a lot of people will have the conversations around tradition. This is my tradition. This is traditional. This is, this is the traditional form of marriage. But the conversation tends to fall a bit flat because there's no distinction to what tradition you're talking about.
Right.
Whose tradition of marriage are you practicing? And so last season, if y'all didn't catch it, we had JD and I's Oluo, Chief Sekou J, come on to talk about what's leading you. Right? Just from that perspective of like, what does a person that practices these traditions look like, and how do they define what's leading them? Now you're helping us bring it more into like the really of like, this is what we talk about when we say things like every choice got an invoice, right? It's not because we just chose that. It's because when you have an ETOP, when you practice these traditions, the parameters are specific to you. You get your own ETA when you initiate, and you have your own set of parameters that you can and cannot do. Like Shantrelle said, it will behoove you to follow them, but ain't nobody gonna eat your lunch if you don't. Your life's just gonna be more complicated, and you're gonna have more work to do. So it's a lot that like we haven't deeply gotten into, but that's why we're here. That's why we brought you to the floor.
I love it. What was the third thing? It was like ETA, it was Ego.
And I don't know if like, because that could be a lot with you.
Shango?
Yeah, to explain what Shango is.
Shango for dummies.
We could be here for a while, so give them 101.
I mean, to the point of divine masculine, again, in the pantheon of deities and gods and goddesses, and a lot of people are familiar with Greek mythology and Roman mythology because we had to learn it in school, right? And we were just for the show. We learned about Zeus and Venus, the goddess of love, and Europe. So it's like that is a mythology. Even Adam and Eve is a mythology. That's a creation myth. And all groups of people around the world have their own creation myth, right? The Yoruba people from Nigeria had their creation myth. The Igbo people had their creation myth. Even the Hausa people, depending on if they're relying on like a traditional cultural myth or that of like Arab or that's something different. But there are all of these creation myths, right? And so, and Adam and Eve is only one of like Judeo-Christian folks. That's their creation myth. So, go in terms of this pantheon of gods and goddesses was actually a real king in the Oyo Empire in Nigeria. And upon his death, he was deified. He is seen as the god of thunder and lightning. He is also associated with justice. He is definitely a warrior king. He's also the master strategist. He's also a good time guy. Shango loves a good time. He loves the party. Shango had 3 wives. There's only one official wife, which was Oba. And then, you know, Oshun and Oya they have been called his wives, but per Apatakis and, you know, and oral tradition.
You just keep throwing out vocabulary.
Listen, I'm telling. That's why this episode is going to be recorded, ladies and gentlemen. You will probably have to catch the replay. Bring your dictionary. Bring your thesaurus.
No, you're going to have to provide
your Google guides ready.
Look, but, you know, they were like his side pieces. You know, like his side women, his side chicks, Oshun and Oya. But so, and that is the God, that is the deity, that's the spirit that lives in my head that I was initiated to. As a woman, when I found this out, you know what's so funny? When I first learned about Yoruba, but like a lot of people do, like Lukumi, Ifa, whatever, you know, any of the like the systems that exist, people always want to assume when they start finding out about all these cool deities, like in Orisha, who they connect with the most. For most women talking about divine feminine, they're wanting to connect with and identify with who?
Oshun.
All day, every day. Particularly then when, you know, Beyonce amplified Oshun energy and like, you know, and Lemonade, it was like everybody Oshun, right? Even your boy Jay-Z in that collab album he did with Jay Electronica, he was like, you know, Maya Risha, Shango, December, right? So he even shouting out Shango, right?
Right.
So I think his birthday is on Shango's day, but
December 4th. Yep.
Yeah.
What's
interesting is that most women, like, I'm an Oshun. I always identify with St. Joan of Arc. My name is Shantrelle Patrice, named after my mama, Patricia, Joan, for St. Joan of Arc, Lewis, because St. Joan of Arc was my confirmation saint. So in the same way that we initiate in, like, you know, Lukumi, Ifa, to these different Orisha, you go through your confirmation in like Catholicism, where like when you're baptized as a child, that's your parents choosing Catholicism for you. And then when you're 13, you go through your confirmation, which you're confirming the decision that they made. It's almost like when you make nice, you know, I guess in Lukumi, and people don't need to understand that. So y'all don't need to
people don't need to understand that.
They don't need to understand that. So you know, it's so I selected St. Joan of Arc because I always identify with this woman having masculine energy and being a fierce warrior. So then naturally, you know, because I've always had like tomboyish, gender bending energy. I mean, even what I have on this top and bottom, this is a traditional, you know, male, like man outfit in Nigeria, right?
Yep.
And so I have this like gorgeous, like, what is Agbada? Yeah,
Agbada. Yep.
Yeah,
that's
just
it.
real
quick, because I think we go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so all that to say, I identify with St. Joan of Arc. So when I first got into the religion, I was like, oh, I must be a Noya, right? Because I'm like, this is warrior woman, and like, I'm gotta be an Oya. Because again, I don't know shit, so I'm like, oh yeah. And I've always had a relationship with Egun because, you know, Oya is definitely connected to Egun. So I was always going to cemeteries and venerating my ancestors. So I'm like, I must be an Oya. And then I was like, no, I started doing my dandy work. And I was like, I got to be in Alegba because my birthday is on Alegba Speak.
Look.
There we go.
Listen, me Barbado played. Alegba was like,
pause.
Maybe stop at Shango. Don't. But nah, we had a question come in. Well, Tiffany, we'll jump to your question in a second when Shantrelle jumps back in. But just to kind of to close out this section of the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever want to know more about this stuff, like Shantrelle's Instagram page is right there. If you have not jumped into the Buku Hoodoo Clubhouse, like she goes live on these topics regularly to bring you all the depth of what's going on within the traditions as they sit traditionally across the spectrum in Nigeria, to the Caribbean, to South America, and then to like what our lineages of African Americans tend to come from, right? So she be hitting the whole scope and spectrum of that.
No, listen, Shantrelle P. Lewis is a whole griot. She's actually 3 cultures in one on any given day.
That's it.
Speaking of intersections in Elegba, but since you only asked about Shango, we're gonna leave it at Shango.
Because they were both like, listen, I love how it works.
You don't even believe in a devil, and a devil is busy. All your Christians, there's no such thing as a devil. That was something else that they taught us. But the devil is a liar, and the motherfucker is busy too.
Shango, as soon as you mention Elegua, Shango's probably like, no. This is my seat.
Right.
Stop.
I was just gonna say I was gonna get my head more and a rat ran across the door, and I was like, "See,
that's it." But we had a question. Tiffany Caesar brought in the question real quick. I wanted to bring up.
Yeah. So, what is the thought process behind curating an African spiritual experience in spaces that have been notoriously aligned with Western hegemony, like the museum?
I worked at Black cultural institutions. I mean, my work started at the African American Museum in Philadelphia. I ran the McKenna Museum of African American Art in New Orleans. I worked for Dr. Martha Moreno Vega, who is the woman who coined the term African diaspora. Bata La priest of 40 plus years. What people don't know about her is that when she coined the term African diaspora, because that was a term associated with, like, if you look up diaspora, you're gonna get a lot of hits about the Jewish community and the Jewish diaspora, right? And their dispersal throughout the globe. And so she was like, well, she was looking at the term and she was like, well, this applies to African people because through the Ma'afa, the Middle Passage experience, we also experience a dispersal throughout the globe, right? So when she started attributing diaspora to our experiences, she was getting all kinds of like hate letters, hate threats, mail, like you can't use this term. Like there was some type of like homogeny in terms of like hegemony in terms of like who ownership
to own the diaspora.
And she was like, but the diaspora, this is in a dictionary. So I worked at the Caribbean Cultural Center. She had done that work long before me in terms of centering African spirituality inside of these spaces. Yeah. So I like going back to JD's question earlier, like I've always centered myself in my work. You know what I mean? So it's like, how am I not going to, my work has always been also meant to disrupt, because I was an African-centered curator. I am an African-centered storyteller. So when I do things, it's going to be circular and it's going to be African-centered and not, my background was not in Western art history. It was in, my degrees are in Africana studies, so that's how I did that in those spaces. And I work for Black folks. I wasn't trying to work in no white institutions.
I mean, was there any other difference though? Like you considering the environment that gave birth to you, what else were you really gonna be? This is your life.
This is it. This is your you walking in your path.
You forever.
That's it. You won't.
But every choice is an invoice, as Courtney says. Like I didn't have to be this way. There was something in my spirit as a child. Like when I went to Howard, I could have tried to blend in and change my accent or whatever. You know what I mean? I could have chosen to go to a white Catholic school in New Orleans as opposed to an all Black Catholic school for girls. You know what I mean? So it's like it was a choice. It was just like something that I was born with a certain level of maturity. Like I say, I came in the world through fire with an umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. And it was a choice that I made at a very early age, Yeah.
You were going to live fully as you were.
Free.
As you are and nothing else.
Free. I'm a free Black woman.
To keep us on time, even though time is a constant.
Oh gosh.
We way off it, but it don't matter.
So we can get like one thing.
That's it. JD, you want to choose what one thing?
Absolutely. Okay, well, I like this. Like you've already actually knocked out one, like genealogy as it relates to tradition, right? We know how that shows up in your work. Let's talk a little bit about your work only because you made a really great point before about how you feel most comfortable in a man's clothes.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, sorry, let me rephrase. You feel comfort in things that are traditionally assigned to something that's not supposed to be you. Like, yes. You gender bend well because you have an understanding of, and thank you for catching me and correcting me. You understand how to manage both of your like masculine and feminine energies at the same time. Yeah. Like, right. When it's time to make decisions, you lock in, you don't play, you execute. When it's also time to chill and sort of let your hair down, you seem to be able to have a good time as well.
Well, see, but the fact that you even, I think underlying that as a suggestion in terms of taking care of your business is a masculine thing, right? Yeah. Women are the ones that be fucking handling business, and that's what I found as a married woman. I remember my aunt was like, "But is he a man?" That's what she told me on my wedding night when talking about her husband. That her mother-in-law told her, and there was a lot of things that were conflicts in terms of tone. And I was like, "Oh, it's because you're a man." Because I was brought up by a male chauvinist as my daddy's only child, and my daddy's definitely patriarchal. My grandfather was patriarchal. My great-grandfather was patriarchal, and he passed that down to me. I also embodied like this idea of like this like male like supremacy and chauvinism, right? Because he was like, "Oh, women emoting and blah blah blah." But it wasn't until I was a woman. I'm like, wait, this is the disconnect because you a man.
But Shantrelle, you bring up an interesting point there because we can see how that moves on both sides because JD said masculinity. He didn't say woman.
Thank you.
True. You see how it goes on both sides. So like, and we even know this from nature's perspective, right? If you look at a lion pride, the most masculine ones in the lion pride, the hunter, it's the lionesses. So the energetic is the foundation that, like, at least from our perspective, we try to bring it to the energetic because we are often so tuned, like it goes here. And we lose that. But with you're fluid in that sense. So like you can constantly tap in, reprogram, and do it in real time.
And moreover, not even trying to cut you off, I just want to get to the question I wanted to ask. Because I see how my wording made it seem like I was trying to say something else. So like, let me realign this.
Okay.
So your understanding of the fluidity between both of these polarities, of understanding how to navigate successfully your masculine and feminine paradigms, and also directly challenge the way that we conventionally think about what feminine energy actually is, what masculine energy actually is.
Right.
All came to the forefront in the Dandelion Project. Because I've looked through this book. I am a fan of this work.
You should bring it up. Go ahead. Keep going.
And listen, from the sapir in the Congo to even bring it, man, come on.
Just gonna let it breathe real quick for everybody. Just gonna let it breathe. Whew.
Technology.
And that's what I'm saying. So I'm gonna give a direct quote, and then I'm gonna turn my mouth off and my ears on, and I'm gonna let you speak.
Okay.
On how you got there. So, the Dandelion Project, curating images of Black dandies that has taken the form of an international traveling exhibition, a film series, and a book. The project connects the subversive contemporary fashion and lifestyle movement to historical images and has dated the movement that blends African aesthetics with European menswear back to the 15th century in Africa. Women dandies and trans men are also featured, further complicating the idea of Black masculinity. What made you decide to reframe the lens of masculinity in style and culture?
It was definitely connected to the bombardment of images about Black men. Again, like I've revered the men in my family. You know, like my history. My dad's like, "Oh, tell them that you got this from your pa." Like, say, "Yeah, motherfuckers, I got this from my daddy." I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do that on my next interview, right? I've done it for him. I'm gonna send him the link to this because he was like, "This is where the hell you got this shit from? You got that from me?" Okay, daddy. Yes. Right, some of it, you know. Then he'd be trying to talk about my mama, like on the flip side, and what I did or did not inherit it from her. But I was always influenced by the men in my family and the men in my life, just like the women in my family, you know. But my understanding of myself and my identity really came from my dad and really came from my grandfather. And so it was in contrast to the bombardment of images that I was seeing of Black men in media and popular culture. But check this out. When I first did the exhibition, I didn't want to touch gender and I don't want to touch sexuality. Or no, I think initially in 2010, I wanted photographers to photograph Black men who identify as straight, because I was also trying to complicate that if a man dresses with a pink shirt on, a well-fitted pink shirt, and some like in the flowers and stuff, then that means that he is something else, like in terms of his sexuality. And what's interesting is when you look at like Nigerian men, Caribbean men and stuff like that with these tight-fitting clothes, I'm like, where does this come from? Europe. A lot of things when we understand about men and women and what men do and what women do, that is Eurocentric, right? So and it's very patriarchal and it's very Eurocentric. So I was trying to complicate that that's why I wanted the photographers initially to photograph men who identify as straight, because it's like this idea that if they don't dress like this, they're not straight, they're queer, and then that's a problem. So that was a way of me addressing it without like directly addressing it. It was in Egypt when I was going down the Nile on a cruise with my big sis, Dream Hampton. And Dream was like, yo, sis, how you gonna do a project about Black masculinity and not include like women and non-binary folk? I'm like, damn. So I could have like stuck my feet in the ground, but I was just like, nah, and I had to look at that because again, if I looked at my own self as an example, I'm like, yes, how am I going to talk about Black masculinity through this very, very narrow lens? And that's when the project expanded to include masculine of center women, to include feminine dandies, like feminine women dandies and femme dandies, and also trans men. So, but again, that had to meet me being open to like an evolved conversation, and like going back to like the concept of like defining divine femininity and divine masculinity. This is always a learning process. You're always growing, you know. I'm always evolving and growing. So if somebody challenges me on something, I'm open then to exploring and delving into my understandings up until that point, and then like, and where I need to go, you know, and try to also again get back to my why, pushing us further in terms of our liberation as a people, and knowing that this is something that a conversation I need to have. So now then, when my 70-something-year-old Black daddy from the lower Ninth Ward picks up a book about Black masculinity, and he flips to a picture of Teak Milan, who is a trans man, or a picture of my homegirl Holly, who is masculine of center, then that might be a very non-confrontational way and what was the word? Threatening way for him to engage in this conversation about gender and sexuality, not even sexuality, but gender in ways that he would not have been able to, he would have been closed off to before.
We're just letting it breathe. Ain't nothing freeze.
Just letting it breathe.
Just letting it breathe. I'm gonna drink some water. You should too.
Lazy.
You should also drink some water.
That's it. This is why we brought Shantrelle on here. This is why she's the perfect person to close out the Am I My Sister Keeper series, because you can see like ain't no play in this.
Kate getting banged, water.
And the part that I will say about you, sister, that I love the most is the fact that you remain open-minded in the midst of all the knowledge and wisdom and lived experience that you have. It's always still an open container for you to add more to the pot. And for me, at least, like that's the most important thing about our interactions together. And then how, for me, I've taken that into like other aspects of my life, because quiet is kept, and you may not know this, but when I was first going through my separation towards my divorce, like you were the person who put me onto the 3 books that changed my life. We had a conversation. I remember it to this day because I was picking up my car, and it reminded me today because I was picking up my car from service. And you told me to read The Way of the Superior Man. You told me to read The Spirit of Intimacy. And then there was another book by Deepak Chopra that I read, but it was very short.
It was The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success.
Spiritual Laws of Success. Yes. And those 3 books started to allow me to open my mind from a space of like, I was already in a place of submission to learn new information. But the way the information impacted me, especially that spirit of intimacy, because it was the first book I had ever read that talked about intimacy from an African-centered perspective. That was not completely Eurocentric. And so you changed my life just by you being who you are. So I've never gotten a chance to like truly thank you for it, but I thank you now publicly for that space that you created for me.
Oh, I love you, Courtney.
Cool. So you basically like indirectly cause 50% of DMA's occurrence. I appreciate that.
You said of DMA's occurrence?
This series, like
because without him getting there, I wouldn't have had somebody to help me build this.
Absolutely.
Wow.
That's it.
So we make the job easier.
Yeah, because like now all JD got to do is be JD, and he don't have to like make up for all the stuff that would have been really, really immature if I was who I was back then. Because it was different. And I gotta say, you know, like Shantrelle, you knew me in those days, like 2014. Listen,
yeah,
we
I forgot you were married. To be honest with you, I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen.
It did happen. It was a whole experience. Yep, listen. We got a whole little human to prove it too.
I know.
Tiffany, so those books will be dropped in the Facebook group Divine Masculine Activated by Mastermind Connect. Yeah, that's where all of our resources go.
But it looks like, brother, we right on time. We perfect with this. So Shantrelle, as we begin to curate your exit from this live stream, is there anything you want to leave the good people, the audience, with? Tell them about what you got going on, where they can find you, all that good and beautiful stuff.
Well, I just briefly, because I was cut off in the story that I was saying earlier, like when I found out that my head got marked and I found out that I was Shango, I cried. Because I was like, damn, I've always been too much, too loud, too much. A lot of men that I dated, I could not handle this. And it was like,
was too extra.
In order to be in a healthy relationship, that I need to be submissive in a particular type of way, right? And so I was always in conflict with that. So I cried like, damn, I'm already a lot. And now you talking about the God of thunder and lightning. That's what I'm, subjecting my life to. Yeah. And to move through the world as a woman Shango, it is also like in being a healthy relationship with a Nigerian Leo, in Nigeria, in Lagos, Victoria, Leke Phase 1, Oluwatoyin, people, and then I show up as
you said Leke Phase 1?
Yes, that's the neighborhood that he grew up in.
Yeah, he grew up, yeah.
There's a phase 1 in it. I'm caught in that detail. How many phases of Leke are there?
Phase 2, all that stuff. So, I mean, so it's just something I'm constantly navigating, Mafedafon Shango, Mafedafon Olegba, Mafedafon Obatala, my Ajibonakan is a Shango, a Scorpio Shango at that. My godmother is, my Yelosha is an Obatala. So it's like, all of these like strong women too. But yeah, I mean, it's just like show up as yourself, be free. Like people need to free up, lively up yourself. Mama Coco says that a lot. You got a lot, and like a lot of folks they know when like we are so accustomed to discomfort though, in terms of like how we dress, how we communicate, how we choose our partners and stuff like, and it's just something that, because nobody told us like the way you're showing up, it's okay. Now some shit is problematic and needs to be dismantled, but I think also that showing up as your most authentic self and not like a self like, oh, I got to prove, I got to carry this like this idea of masculinity because of the toxic environment and dysfunctional environment that I grew up in. And so I just, I would just, impress upon people just to really like, free yourself, you know what I mean? And like be open to like unpacking, dismantling. Like, my favorite Octavia Butler quote is, in order to rise from its flames, a phoenix must first burn. And I burn over and over and over again. I'm consistently burning to ashes to be built back up. So follow me on AP Scientology, on Buku Hoodoo.
We're going to give 1 point of privilege to the good sister Rasha because
that's a really good question.
Because it's Gemini season.
Purely.
Because it's Gemini season.
Rashad, this is your Gemini season favor, by the way. Let it be publicly known. But we got you.
Stated. But no, good sister Shantrelle, like any pieces of advice as a Gemini sister for the sisters with tenacity, living their purpose in the midst of crazy.
Facts.
What? Lord, have mercy.
Child, remember, we got a time.
Like DM me.
When I start doing this, go ahead and wrap that up.
I don't even know how to answer that because I've been posting Gemini quotes like in my D. It's been crazy, but
you really have.
My godmother always says like you got one life to live, and that's your own. And there's always that quote of like, I can only be myself because everybody else is taken. I don't know how to be anybody else but myself. Like Marlon said, yep, just be you, baby. You heard me? Just be you, baby.
Come on, baby.
You said you heard me. Oh my God.
Okay, let me tell you, okay, just be yourself, okay? Because everybody else is taken. I ain't got no time to be in nobody else up in here. Okay?
Sandra, single-handedly, you have like one of my favorite accents in existence.
Of all time.
Of all time. It's amazing. Like, you need to be the voice of my ways.
Hold on. You about to get
exactly.
Hold on. Don't turn over there. Turn that way. You going the wrong way. Oh,
that's it. That's it. We got that's gonna go offline. We gotta make this work.
Yeah, Shantrelle, we appreciate you. We love you. Highest of gratitude to you, Queen Sister. And we will get at you soon.
I love y'all too. Thank y'all. This has been so much fun.
Peace.
Peace.
Whew, okay.
That felt so good.
Man, I needed that. That was great.
It was so much fun.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we always say, like, share, subscribe to this web series. Like, as you can see, like we walking the dogs to get y'all the most nutritious content that we can with these conversations. To close it out, as always, gratitude, attitude, and latitude as we bring
we got to do it.
First and foremost, gratitude to the DMA community. If you are in the private DMA Facebook group and you were in there this past week, it's been some fun. It's been some fire. So if you haven't, Divine Masculine Activated, search it on Facebook. You will see the the Facebook group pop right up. Please join, bringing these conversations to life every single day and every single moment that we can. The attitude, JD.
The attitude, as it is Taco Tuesday, margarita rules. Take everything with a grain of salt, just like the rest of the Gemini season, or for the rest of the Gemini season.
And then
everybody wants to smoke right now.
Listen, everybody. Last but not least, this week's latitude, your greatest gifts are what you should be charging the most for. That is from Priya Parker. If you want to hear more about that, Priya Parker was on the latest episode of the Brene Brown podcast. She talked about a whole lot of really, really heavy issues regarding how our society is about to like reintegrate into normalcy and how normal it ain't gonna be. So thankful to Priya for bringing that for us this week. Good brother, we did what we came here to do.
Like we always do about this time.
Always do it this time. Ladies and gentlemen, this completes the Am I My Sister's Keeper series of the Divine Masculine Activated. Next week, we are back into a normal flow of just bringing you what we want to bring you. We will have the good brother Elton Anderson, aka Detroit Chopra, one of the best podcast names I've ever heard. Detroit Chopra, coming to tap in with us on Tuesday to talk about a lot of different things that have been leading him through time, and now what's leading his journey of self-discovery, self-mastery, coaching and development, supporting others, all the way from Bali.
Praise be to the Wi-Fi God. So we're just gonna go ahead and appease in advance of that.
And I almost guarantee you he's gonna have on a tank top or no shirt. So like, this is just Elton.
Oh,
I'll do the challenge.
I might be no shirt in a hammock then if he gets to be no shirt.
I'm keeping my shirt on.
Yes.
I might
that ain't got nothing to do with me. Anyways, until next time, y'all have an amazing Tuesday and do dope shit.
Peace and love.